Welcome to another edition of Porque o Mundo Precisa de Água, because the world needs water. I'm Everton de Oliveira, Professor Água, from the Instituto Água Sustentável, Sustainable Water Institute. Today, I have the honor of speaking with a very special guest, my friend, Professor Gabriel Eckstein from Texas A&M University, one of the world's leading authorities in water law and water governance, especially in disputes involving transboundary and groundwater resources. He's very keen on that. You see that. We'll be discussing the role of water in geopolitics and climate regulation, and even in lesser known phenomena such as airborne rivers, flying rivers for those who don't know, and the biotic pump. Okay, welcome, Gabriel. You are well known for your expertise in international disputes over water. How do you see the current major tensions involve groundwater and surface waters across borders? I know you're very keen on that, and I love talking to you about this subject. Please, welcome.
All right, thank you, Everton. Thanks for having me here. So I don't think that we're quite yet in a what I would call a dire situation, but I think we're slowly the conditions are growing more tense, and there's a number of factors for why it's growing more tense, and it's I have to say it's on a global level. And, of course, there's different parts of the world that are maybe more tense than others, but it's really on a global level. We've got expanding populations. We've got growing economic needs and different ways that we're using water. And of course, we have all these climatic changes that are happening. And all of this is really putting stress on our freshwater resources and also our abilities to use these resources. And I think you see this tension sometimes coming up in the news. Maybe more with surface water disputes. You see recently the dispute between India and Pakistan over the Indus River, where India decided that it wants to put the treaty on the side for the moment. And it's unclear what the status of the treaty is right now. And that was not because of a water issue. That was because of a different issue. But water is still a tense issue between those countries. The Nile Basin, Ethiopia, Egypt, and
Oh, yeah.
Sudan, that's been going on for many years. In the Tigris and Euphrates, you have this continuing between Turkey upstream and then Syria, but really with more so with Iraq downstream, Brahmaputra and Ganges with China building all sorts of dams up in the upstream reaches of the rivers, and then India and Bangladesh downstream that are concerned. Yeah, on the Mekong, on the Orange River in southern Africa, even on rivers that you don't necessarily think are always subject to tension, but the Rio Grande, here in between U.S. and Mexico, there's a
Mexico.
lot of tension because there's just not enough water for everybody for all the things that they want to do with the water.
Exactly, exactly. Or even Canada, you have lots of water, but it's still some dispute that you see here and there. Not big thing, but it's
Yeah,
happening
yeah.
already with the
I
US,
should,
right?
absolutely. And I should add one thing because I focused on surface water and I know groundwater is close to your heart. Um, but even groundwater, it may be, and I excuse the pun, it's simmering under the surface. The tension is simmering under the surface, but it's still there. We have tensions between US and Mexico right now over groundwater use, and we have no regulatory scheme between the two countries. We have
Okay.
even in southern South America, there's a little bit of tension on the Guarani in some
Exactly.
locations. In the Middle East, you see this on the Nubian Sandstone a little bit, the mountain aquifer between the Israelis and Palestinians, and other places. So it's not just surface water; it's also groundwater, but maybe to
Agree.
to a lesser extent.
I agree. I agree because it's not seen. I agree with you. So, but even if surface rivers, surface water receive more attention, the transboundary aquifer are not in the debate, but they're very important. So, what are the main legal and diplomatic challenges in addressing these resources that are invisible. Yes, yet they are very vital for
Right.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the invisibility part really plays a big factor in why you don't see transboundary aquifers more in the news or more in front of diplomats as issues. You've heard the phrase "out of sight, out of mind," and I think this is part of the problem with groundwater is that people just don't necessarily think about it. They a lot of people, and I think this is, at the diplomatic level, political levels, but also at the common level, they don't necessarily always understand what groundwater is and how it flows. And we really do lack data on and information on groundwater in many parts of the world. When you look at a river, you can see it, you can measure it so much more easily in terms of flow rates and chemistry and so on. It's a little more complicated with groundwater because you have to drill for it, and it's more expensive to do so. So people don't have as good a sense of something they can't see, so they don't know, you know, which aquifers are connected to which rivers or which aquifers cross the border, and they don't always know if they're pumping from a transboundary aquifer. So that's part of that, out of sight, out of mind part. But from a legal point of view, we really have very, very few examples. We have examples of treaties for hundreds of rivers. We have actually thousands of treaties for navigation, for irrigation, taking water for irrigation, and for all these other non-navigational uses for rivers and lakes. But there's only 7 or 8 treaties that are specifically for a transboundary aquifer for the whole world. And we know that we have more than 400 transboundary aquifers, the ones that we know of. So we have very little experience in terms of what laws should we apply, how should we regulate them, what would work best in any particular situation. So this is part of the problem.
Very good. So some people that are watching this, they don't know about your book because I have an interview with you of your book on aquifers. Can you talk a little bit about your book and your father, late father?
Yeah. So this is one of the efforts, I'm trying to make my own little effort to help the situation and educate people. So we wrote a book, my father and I, just before he passed away, we wrote a book together on the transboundary effects that using an aquifer, what transboundary effects might happen. And this relates to things like, well, is the aquifer transboundary? Is the aquifer connected to a river that is transboundary, crossing a border between countries? And if you put a well in one side, when might it affect the other side of the border, meaning the other country? And so it takes in uh, ideas. I should say it has a very strong scientific basis. My father was a hydrogeologist, and I came from it from a legal perspective, and we kind of put this together. So it takes into concepts like, is this a losing stream or a gaining stream? What's the relationship? Is this a fossil aquifer that has very little flow, or is this a heavily recharged aquifer? Is it confined aquifer? Is it unconfined? And so taking all these ideas into account and trying to put them in the context of an international border where either the aquifer is transboundary or the aquifer connects to a river that is transboundary, and talking about under this, what circumstances might you have cross-border effects or cross-border impacts.
Interesting. Well, this is I asked about your book because you're a lawyer, right? And the beauty about your book, first is the very very nice relationship between father and son because you get the information from a
Yeah.
hydrogeologist and you it was well touched by yourself, seen as a lawyer, and we clearly see that you. Uh, I talk to many lawyers about groundwater, and most of them don't know a thing about groundwater, as you might know. In your case, you have a deep understanding. So I do recommend people. We'll leave the link for people to download the book down here. It's here in the Groundwater Project. It's a very interesting book. Nice illustrations, easy to understand and to see the things. It's very useful for lawyers as well, not only, especially for lawyers, I would say, right? The
Thank you.
job, but it's very nice for both.
Thank you, Everton. And I should say thanks to you. I think it's already been translated into Portuguese and
Yes.
maybe Spanish. So thank you for helping with that process.
Oh, that's okay. That's welcome. It's a very nice book. I loved it. So that's it's fun doing this thing. So in recent years, concepts such as the flying rivers, you say atmospheric rivers,
Yeah.
and biotic pump theory have gained attention, or I'm trying to make it getting traction. So this shows that forests act as a powerful climate engines transporting and regulating atmospheric moisture. This is quite interesting because when we think about the flying rivers, it's another topic that we'll have to see how people will fight for water, right? That's a possibility because, well, since you have somewhere that produces water and my neighbor is profiting from that thing that I'm maintaining, so let's say it's very likely that he could pay for that service, right? So, do you follow these discussions, and how do you see the possibility that this phenomena could become part of international water and climate negotiations?
Yeah. What I like about this question is because it recognizes the fact that water, we can't deal with water in a vacuum. It's not just the water resource. The water is connected to everything. So I would actually take your question and maybe even expand it further. It's not just forests and flying rivers, but also land use and biomanagement and administration of other natural resources and economic development and population growth and all these other issues that we have this synergistic effect that we see it maybe in climate change, we see it in water scarcity, but it's all connected. But in terms of your question, I mean, do I see that it might become part of international water law or climate law? I have to say that uh, the law tends to be reactionary. Um, uh, when
Oh,
we develop laws, we tend to take the issues that are in front of us, and those issues are not always the problem, right? It's just that what we see in front of us, and so the law rarely takes a systems approach or a holistic approach to regulation. So I definitely like the tone of the questions, and I do think we need to take a more holistic view of governance and law and regulations in terms of how we manage our climate, our water resources, and so on. Do I see us moving in that direction? Um, I think it's a very slow progress. I think we have a better sense that we're all interlinked in terms of our world, in terms of water and climate and land use and all these other things, but yet we're a reactionary species, and especially when it comes to the law, we tend to just put the band-aid, the legal band-aid, on just that one problem, and not really recognize that it's all connected.
I agree with you. I understand that clearly. The law has actually it has to be reactive. That's
Yeah.
the best way to go, right? Not creating situations out of, try to anticipate situations is better when you have things you have an experiment that is being solved by people and then the law just makes it happen in the best way. But in that case, as I've been studying lately, and there's the previous questions I talked about the biotic pump. Thing is that as this study evolves, and I have some people that I'm already interviewing about that, and it's gonna come up soon, and I hope you enjoy watching that. is that we have water vapor as the main greenhouse gas, 60% compared to zero point zero 0.04 of CO2. So if we do have some regeneration of forests and areas like that by following the theory of the biotic pump theory and things like that, we may control, like it happened already in Maharashtra, in India, for example. It decreased 2 degrees in the temperature of the whole state by having revegetation, um, like agroforestry and things like that. So that would be a big change because today we have climate change as attraction for things. And if that, becomes a reality, people understand. Now we have, it's hard for anyone to talk about anything else but CO2, because CO2 is everywhere. And we're not fighting CO2, it's just bringing another solution to help the same problem, right? So we have different situations. If we have that, then water will become something that we can price it, or the benefit of water could be priced, and then law would come into place because we have to make rules that are acceptable to anyone. What do you think about that?
If I understand the question, I, I'm a little hesitant because I think in my mind, there's a difference in terms of how greenhouse gases, anthropocentric greenhouse gases, how they work in the climate versus how water vapor works in the climate. And what I mean by this is that, to my understanding, is that things like carbon dioxide and methane and so on, they're drivers of climate change, right?
Yeah.
We produce them and we can stop producing them. But water vapor is not necessarily a driver that we can control. It's a function of temperature. And I'm not sure if we control the production of that water with that water vapor in the same way that we can control greenhouse gases. Also, I'm not sure the practicalities. I mean, how can we tax or trade or capture or regulate water vapor? And I know that what you're suggesting, that maybe there is a way to sort of put a price on it. It's something that I think would be novel and interesting, and we'd have to really think about, how do we do it in a way where we actually control that water? Because I'm not sure that we have the same level of control that we do on greenhouse gases that we're producing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. But but that would take a big chunk of our interview here, and I could explain to you how it works. But let's assume that it's doable. We can
Yeah.
produce water vapor, and the water vapor, to be very short, as it goes up 5 kilometers or so, the water vapor, and a decrease in temperature, it becomes it becomes liquid again, right?
Mhm.
So when it becomes liquid again, it has a huge decrease in volume. It shrinks a lot, right? Like more than 1,000 times, and that creates a vacuum. That vacuum pull up more moisture. That's how it works. Pull up, but then
Yeah.
the trade winds that
Yeah.
bring more water from the ocean. That's how vegetation brought water to the continents, right? So if we have enough area revegetated, we can actually produce more in this latent heat when you have it up in the troposphere. It goes away to the space, you know, to the space, and that's how it cools the planet from the beginning. That's vegetation that keeps most of that keeps the earth in the right temperature. So the CO2 is a change, but if we bring in more and if we produce by vegetation more water vapor, yes, we may decrease the temperature for sure, right? So let's assume that this really happens that way and we can measure. Do you anticipate that we could trade that? What do you think? It's all hypothesis, right? Yes.
No, no, right, but we are I have to say a relatively smart species, not always the smartest, but we're relatively smart, and we do try to come up with new ways to um, to do things, right? Um, and in many countries, we are very in tune with the market. And we
Yeah,
like to come up with new ways of using the market. And we've done this in many ways that we'd never even imagined. So I won't say no because I think this is a very intriguing idea of whether can we put a price tag on the water vapor through revegetation, right? Uh, and it's going to be a function of can we measure it? If
yeah,
there's a way to measure the amount of water vapor that we are actually adding and then contributing to the atmosphere and then contributing to climatic changes or reducing the effects of climate change, um, so
definitely.
part of it's going to have to be measured. So,
Exactly. I agree. I agree.
but if that can be done, I mean, I'm sure that somebody will come up with a way to monetize it. So,
Definitely. Well, it's in that situation, it's similar to aquifers.
yeah,
You have to measure it so we
yeah,
can put a price on it, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
we can
yeah.
compensate. It's not exactly putting a price in water, but for the benefit of that, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Good. So, which models of corporations, of international cooperation in water governance, do you consider most promising to avoid conflicts and promote shared water security?
Yeah.
Tricky question.
Uh,
Another one. I
well,
know.
well, well. That assumes that there is one. There's three models and one is the best. But I don't think there is a model.
Okay.
I don't think there's a model of cooperation, especially for something like a water resource, a shared water resource, because every water resource is unique. It has its own unique geology, geography, even culture, right? The people that living around it in South Asia, of a particular river in South Asia, is a very different culture than in South America or Europe. And so there's culture and social issues, religious issues that have to be taken into account. And so each river basin or aquifer basin is going to have its own unique um, you know negotiations. I mean, could you have some basic framework ideas of okay, negotiate in good faith, the idea that you should cooperate as opposed to get into conflict. I mean, these are very generic concepts. um,
Yeah.
Equity, okay. And I know, all the non-lawyers are, dislike the notions of, when lawyers bring in equity, fairness, justice. Well, what's going to be equitable on the Nile Basin is going to be very different than what it's going to be on the Paraná or the Mekong. And so
Exactly.
so I don't know if there's one model that can fix it all.
Have you seen nice solutions
Oh, I've seen solutions,
or let's say
cooperative.
situations that accommodated the problem? Let's say solution is a bit too strong, maybe.
Yeah. Look, there have been a number of cooperative regimes. Look. I'll give you an example with groundwater. Okay,
Yeah.
um, and this is also a good example of how they are so different. Um, if you look at the Genovese aquifer, okay, the Genovese aquifer between Switzerland and France, they developed a very technical management relationship that is in a treaty that I have to tell you, as a lawyer, I find very hard to read because it is so technical. There's very little law in there. I mean, it's all law, but they have formulas in the treaty. Okay, it's
Okay.
very detailed. They talk about aquifer recharge. They talk about allocation and pumping but with numbers. It's a very technical treaty, and it works really well. It was first started in 1978. It had a 30-year lifespan, and then in 2008 they revised it slightly, and then created a new version for another 30 years. And recently,
Wow.
using that same model, they have two new treaties on a couple of small rivers in the same area. That just this past year were not added, but were sort of part of the overall planning between the two countries.
That's interesting.
Very technical, very detailed, not a lot of legalese. Look at the Guarani.
Yes.
I would call the Guarani Aquifer Agreement a framework legal agreement. It doesn't have a lot of details, but it's very legalese. It doesn't have technical issues. Those are left to committees to later to address and
Yeah.
consider. So it's a framework. Look at the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Jordan over the Qadisi aquifer. Um, it's really only addressing pollution and pumping. It's actually prohibiting pumping and prohibiting pollution. And there's very little else that it does.
Mm.
Every location is going to have a different need and different process, and they're going to measure success in relation to what those needs are, as
Interesting.
compared to um, other parts of the world where you have disputes over water and there is no cooperation, or there's little cooperation, or the countries can't figure out what to do. And so success is measured in locally, I think.
Interesting. What about the Nubian aquifer? You have experience there, so because then you're pumping fossil water, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that's a
So, so Nubian is another great example because it doesn't regulate pumping. It's much more of a rather successful data sharing system and regime. They are cooperating, they're exchanging information, they're trying to share data. They're not telling each other to stop pumping, but they might say, you know what, if you pump over here, this might happen. If you So they're sharing information. The countries still make the decisions of what to do and where to pump, but it's a different measure of success based on their particular needs.
interesting, interesting. Well, this is it's good to hear your experience because we have here in Brazil many places in Brazil, not all over the country, but in many places the watershed committees are very well organized, and we discuss how to allocate the water use, right? And you have different uses, and already in some places we are having a dispute because you know the agriculture here in Brazil is very strong, right? So in many places you use a lot of water. Some other places we have lots of rain, so it's not necessary. But still, there is the dispute is arising already because it's lots of views. Okay, and those examples might be very welcome. Well, you have friends here working in that topic already, so they might uh, talk to you if they need your advice on that. But that's really coming. So from what I see, from your experience, we have that's my conclusion from your short explanation here and from what I read from your book. But we have the disputes of the plenty. So we have lots of water. So okay, you have an agreement, and it's much easier to agree. Then you have a dispute of the lack of water. So not much to dispute because you already have lack for both parts. So it's more something of saving that water. And then from what you mentioned, the only one that is a real thing of using water is France and
Switzerland.
is Switzerland, right? Am I correct? Or
For 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 a transboundary aquifer.
yeah,
So I mean, for actual use,
for actual
um,
use, yes.
um, yeah, I'm trying to think the few agreements that are in place, because you have, like I said, data sharing agreements.
Yeah.
You have uh, prohibitions or limits on use. Yeah, it's probably the only one that is directly on the actual use of the aquifers and how to manage the use. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So that's a good example to look at, right?
Yeah. I will say, in terms of examples that are successful, just to come back to your
Well,
question before.
in anyways, a smaller aquifer compared to the other ones, like
Yeah.
right.
But but but
So
but the model, the
yeah,
model
exactly,
is
exactly. The
interesting,
same.
and it relates to one other example I want to throw out to you, which is not for surface, but not for groundwater, but for surface water on the U.S.-Mexico border, which is the International Boundary Water Commission, which regulates all transboundary surface water between U.S. and Mexico. And the interesting thing there is it's managed by technocrats. It's not politicians. It's not lawyers. And so, very similar to the Genovese aquifer management system, it's the technocrats. And they command a lot of respect and they have quite a lot of success. And I think because
Good.
they don't have the politicians in charge and the lawyers in charge, they sort of support from the side. But it's the commissioners for the International Boundary Water Commission for U.S. Mexico, they have to be engineers under the terms of the treaty.
Oh, that's
The
good.
treaty says they have to be like
Technical.
experienced engineers. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's a good way to go. That's a good way to
yeah,
go. If you don't
yeah,
understand, you come up with blurred ideas that may not fit. That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, and it is, and I know I work with that. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's
yeah,
not trivial. You have to study hard to understand in detail these things, right?
yeah.
So, and then you take decisions based on politicians only. That's trouble. That's trouble.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Good, good. So to conclude, what would be your message to government, companies, and citizens about the importance of rethinking water, not only as a natural resource, but as a central element of climate balance and peace among nations?
Okay, just an easy question. Um, so
Yes, yes, yes. It's a closing remark. It's supposed
yeah,
to, you know,
yeah. So
enlightenment there. Yes.
yeah, I think so many people have said that water in the 21st century is going to be the oil of the 20th century, right? So where oil was so important and so strategic for global security, people are saying that water will be the big resource for the 21st century. Um, Whether it becomes the most strategic resource, I think is still unclear, but it will clearly be one of the most important that is going to influence security around the world. As I said at the very beginning, we've got growing disputes or growing disagreements over water in many parts of the world. We've growing demand and economic needs and scarcity in many parts of the world, and of course, climate change is just completely disrupting what we knew in terms of where our water was and how much we had. So it's definitely going to affect diplomacy in multiple sectors, and this is especially true because we need water for everything. I mean, we need it for manufacturing, we need it for agriculture, we need it for people to drink. And even now we have these new technologies like AI and
Oh,
crypto
yeah.
and chip manufacturing, and they all need water. And so I think this is going to uh, uh, be a real challenge. And what we need to do is just to recognize that, among the resources of our planet, water is unique. After air, it's the most critical resource we need for life, and it's critical for everything. Like I said, manufacturing, recreation, cultural, religious practices, and so on. But I think one thing we forget is that there is no substitute. Um, it's the only thing that it is like it. It is so critical, and there's no substitute. And so that means we have to regard it, I think, a little bit differently than every other natural resource. We have to take a more holistic approach to stewarding, to governing, to sharing, and maybe even take a non-legal approach in terms of governance and develop a water ethic in terms of how we relate to water on a daily basis, that we are responsible for this resource for which there is no substitute. So
Very
That would
good.
be my
I
closing.
like the term water ethic because that's goes beyond education, way
Yep.
beyond education, right?
Yep.
So we're still trying to educate people, so we're a long way to get to water ethics in the future. So which is
Yes.
very good. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your vision with us. I really enjoy talk to you. It's a privilege hearing your perspective on the importance of water for peace, climate, and the future of humanity. That's interesting. Very good. You have this. You're quite unique on a lawyer that knows so much about this details on water. I know I have another guy here in Brazil that is very good water lawyer, right? I also love hearing and talking to him. So I'm not we technical people, engineers and geologists, we have, I might say, some prejudice against lawyers, right? And then most of it is well deserved, right? Just a joke. Cannot miss a joke with
Uh,
lawyers, right?
it's
But I really enjoy talking to you. Thank you very much, and we'll distribute to many people this here. And people, please take a look at his books. It's very nice, and help you understand the relationship with groundwater. The graphics and the ideas are very well described in the book. Thank you very much again, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
good to speak with you. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.